Hey everybody, welcome to the bullpen. Today I have Nick Holmes here with me, a dear friend of mine who's also been a business associate. I worked with him out in California at one of his baseball academies, and just wanted to talk to him today about his history and background and kind of how he stayed connected to the game. The guy has taken, baseball and what he loves to do to different countries, even so not even in the United States. And so hopefully you'll pick up on some things if you're thinking about staying in baseball after your career is over, or even any sport. I think it transfers over to pretty much any sport at this point. But Nick, thanks for joining, man.
Hey man, my pleasure. You kidding me? I gotta keep it going here.
Yeah,
Keep
indeed.
feed the dream, right? Feed the
Yeah,
dream.
exactly.
Appreciate you having me on here, Chris.
Yeah, no worries. So talk to me about Nick, little Nick. What was life growing up like? What was sports like? Where did you grow up? That kind of thing.
That's first of all, that's funny. You said Little Nick. That was pretty much my name growing up because my dad was senior, and when I was born, he didn't want me to be called Junior, so they
Okay.
made sure to put Nicholas Alexander Holmes the second on my birth certificate. I don't know what he was thinking at that time, but yeah, so it just became Nick and Little Nick. So, uh, yeah. So, what was the question? Sorry.
So tell me about growing up, man. What you played sports? You played baseball?
Yeah,
What was life like in, was it Iowa?
yeah. So I was born in Des Moines, Iowa, Polk County, and my family was from there. My mother's family was from there. My father's families were from there, and my parents divorced when I was probably 3 years old, and so kind of grew up bouncing back and forth between my mom's and my dad's, and actually lived with my grandma for a little while. So yeah, sports were what kept me out of trouble for sure. Or just the minute I learned how to bounce a ball or throw a ball or do whatever, I was doing it. So baseball. My dad was a hockey player. Actually, I was supposed to be a hockey player.
Okay.
Yeah, my dad played college hockey at Drake University. He was a young father. My mom was a young mother. And so when I was probably 2 years old, I was on skates and going to practice with him, and he was coaching and still playing when I was born. And I think when the story goes, I don't remember, of course, but around, I don't know, 5 or 6 years old, when you could start playing tykes or mites or whatever it was for the hockey, my mom refused to get up at the crack of dawn to take me to practice on Saturdays after working all week, and so it became my dad's responsibility. After a couple of years of that, I think the argument was, if you want him to play hockey, you're going to be responsible for all the stuff, all that kind of stuff. And then when I was 8 years old, I discovered baseball. 8 years old, I discovered baseball. Of course, I was playing in the backyard with friends, but that became the easier sport of the two to, number one, get me out of bed and go do it. And of course, the equipment was a lot less. All you needed was a glove back then.
Right.
You didn't even have cleats or batting gloves or any of that stuff. It was just, go down to the Kmart or the Target and get a glove and you're ready to go.
Didn't smell as
So
bad either.
what's that?
Didn't smell as bad either.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah,
But
that
I think
hockey
I
stuff
think
can get.
yeah, I think that was one of the things that kind of got me going into it. Was I just thought it was a little bit more fun, playing with my friends. Of course, living in the Midwest, you play whatever sport it was that season. So,
Right.
once the winter was gone and hockey was over, football was over, then it's in the spring, and you get the nice spring smells of the fresh cut grass, and it just draws you to the field. And then it was baseball season, and after baseball season, you go right into the summer. And actually, in Iowa, we had to wait until almost summer to play baseball because there was still snow on the ground in March and even in April a lot of times. So, but yeah, that's kind of where I got got into it all, and from there just kept sticking with the different sports. Picked up basketball, started playing football with we actually couldn't play football till about 6th grade. We had a little flag football, and then contact football was in 7th and 8th grade. By the time I got to high school, I realized this is just way over my physicality, man. It's just I was a small kid and getting banged around, and realized real quickly that baseball was the way to go.
Right, right. Yeah, totally. Yeah, I've been talking to people, and I guess it's a generational thing, it seems like anymore. But growing up, we used to play all the different sports, right? You'd play spring, winter, fall would all be a different sport, and then you'd kind of just play whatever that was at the time. But then at some point you realize, hey, this is what I really love, or this is what I need to do now. And it certainly wasn't like today where we see 7, 6, 7, 8 year olds playing travel team ball and
Oh
playing
yeah.
baseball all year round.
Yeah, I couldn't even imagine playing one sport all year round back then. I mean, it just, not only was it not possible because of the weather, but just there were so many other sports that I mean, I did everything. I played tennis, I played golf, I played, racquetball in the wintertime.
Yeah,
There was a little place down the street from us that had indoor racquetball courts, that I got into that because what else are you going to do when it snows? We would go to this little, it wasn't a country club. It was just like a rec club, kind of like a YMCA, but privately owned.
right. Yeah,
And so we had a little membership there in the wintertime, and they had indoor tennis courts, racquetball courts, basketball court, swimming pool. We did,
nice.
and so it was like sometimes we do all those in one day.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know?
that's heaven
And
right there, man.
yeah, and then BMX, I got into riding bikes and doing all that in the summertime too. So it was water sports. We did water skiing and whatever we could do, man. It was always something. I couldn't even imagine saying you're only going to play baseball or any
Right.
sport for the whole year.
Yeah, I
So
mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't want to argue against people who do it, because obviously they do it because either they just love the game, or, and this is the downside flip to me, is that they think because they're gonna play travel ball or baseball all year round, like that's gonna help them achieve a higher goal, and play longer, or be more ready for the draft or something.
yeah,
I just feel like, and you sounds like you kind of grew up like I did, where I was just crazy for anything athletic or sports related. And each one of those things, whether it was water skiing or golf or swimming or tennis or basketball, baseball, football, all that stuff work different muscles and parts of my body and
yeah.
brain. So
Hmm.
I think it just helps you stay more well balanced. But
Different
uh,
strategies to compete in
yeah,
that game. So yeah, I agree. And not only that, I think the biggest thing for me and what I've experienced as a coach later in life and watching that transition and how kids, well, first of all, being in Southern California, you can play one sport all year round. And the way that the
yeah,
cultures in these
yeah,
sports have grown into, year-round training and so on and so forth. But for me, the big word is burnout. Like,
right,
I don't know. I mean, you can do something all the time. Eventually, you're going to get burned out or bored I mean, I couldn't imagine. I know I would. I mean, there's no way I could hold my focus year in and year out with one, knowing that all those other options are out there and that maybe there's something there that's more fun.
yeah,
Like being a kid is just, I think that's the best part of being a kid, is being able to do all those things and try
right,
all these different things to see what you like and
right,
go from there. So, if I get that question ever asked to me by a parent, what do you think? What do you think? I don't hide my thoughts at all and say, you got to let them explore, let them go out, at least till high school. I mean, I could see
right,
maybe like 14 or 15 when you decide, okay, I've tried them all.
yeah,
And this is the sport that I have the most fun at first. May not be my best sport. You see a lot of people, athletes will excel in like their second or even third best sport performance wise, but it's the one they had the most passion and the most fun with. So they actually they go above and beyond, and they supersede those physical expectations or athletic expectations, and they actually go further with that because they love it so much.
right.
And then you got the sport like, well, I'm better at this one. I just don't love it as much. So where are you
Yeah,
gonna where are you gonna put your time? You know?
yeah, good point. Yeah, it's the law of marginal return. When you're talking about playing something for so long at one point in time, you may be great at it, but at some point, that extra hour you spend is not going to give you that extra output that you're looking for, right? And if you just look
Yeah.
at that in pure economic kind of terms, but
Yeah,
yeah,
and with coaches nowadays, you see it all over the social media with all these Division I college coaches in different sports that say, give me the multiple sport athlete on this hand and the sport specific guy in this hand, and I'll take this guy every day, all day, for
yeah,
all the reasons you just said. The difference in playing those sports breeds those other types of qualities with the both physical and mental. So
yeah, fair enough. I hope that's something that people start to grip more onto than what at least I've seen. I haven't been out there in the whole coaching world a ton, but it seems like from the stuff that I follow and just people close to me, it's been an obsession with one sport, specifically baseball in this regard. But that just doesn't seem healthy to me. But to each their own, I guess. So tell
yeah.
me, so keep talking to me about, and we'll get to Southern California at some point, but like what was like you got to high school, and I think everybody was like that too, right? I was the same way. I played football, basketball, baseball. I got to high school, and things started to fall off a little bit. I stopped playing basketball my sophomore year. I still played football, but baseball was like my passion, right? I probably could have played football as well, but baseball was the thing that just woke me up every morning.
Yeah. Well, I should probably, yeah. So I grew up in Des Moines, but I didn't go to high school there. I started high school there my freshman year. Um, and so when I grew up, I went to Catholic schools. I was raised in a Catholic school system, went to a couple public schools there because of the movement of back and forth with my parents. My mom remarried, my dad remarried. My dad moved out of state. He moved to Colorado, then he moved to Texas. So going to all the Catholic schools in Des Moines, and it was funny, I just had a friend of mine visit the other day. We were in fifth grade together, and he asked me the question, so how many of these schools did you go to? I said, all of them. St. Mary's, St. Teresa's, St. Pius, Holy Trinity, St. Anthony's, and it was true. It shaped me who I am today because it forced me to make new friends right away. And
Right,
sports was always my in. I'm thankful that I had the passion to play, had a little bit of ability to be able to compete and not be picked last. And
right,
the
right.
new kids you're already the new kid, so you're already in the hole. But when they saw me kick a dodgeball or throw a baseball or shoot a basketball, I was like, oh, okay, well, maybe this kid's okay. And then I'd
Right.
get picked for teams. Now, my sister, on the other hand, she didn't have it quite so good because she got picked on a lot for being the new kid. But
Yeah.
feel sorry for her. But so going through grade school, I get to the high school. Well, now I go to the only Catholic school in town, and every group of kids that I met along the way are now at the Catholic high school. Well, of course,
Okay.
they're in their own cliques because that's where, they stayed friends from those schools that they went to. Well, I felt like a fish out of water because I was friends with all of them, but it wasn't very acceptable to be that guy that, oh, you're hanging out with the South Siders. Oh, you're hanging out with the West Siders. And it was like, well, and I was getting kind of bounced around like a ping pong ball, and it was kind of stressful, already high school, 14 years old. And mentally, I kind of had a breakdown, and I told my parents, I said, look, I want to go try to live with my dad, and I want to create a new identity and, get out of where I am and start fresh somewhere where nobody knows who I am. I don't know anybody else. And so we did that, and my mom was accepting of it. And so I was on my way to move to Texas. I went down to visit for a bit, and I saw that I could play baseball all year round. I saw that the kids down there were super nice, and they're good athletes, and I felt accepted into their world as a Yankee boy coming down south to play their game. And so yeah, but then my dad got transferred to Jackson, Mississippi, which all I knew that it was a river at that time.
Right.
I didn't know it actually funneled
Pretty
into a
river down
state. Yeah. And so I was a little you know, skeptical at first. Went to a public school. It was you know, pretty big adjustment coming from where I was. You can imagine, you know, socially, culturally, and again, baseball saved me. I was able to compete and able to find a clique of guys that were accepting of me, and didn't get my ass beat every day, which was nice. And so I kind of fell into that, and I decided baseball was my sport. It was it. You know, I was like, I can play this all year round. They had just, you know, started winter ball stuff there within the school, so you could play. I think they called it like B League or something like that, because it wasn't the regular season. And so I made the team, and that was it. So I played baseball the rest of my high school career there. Didn't play any other sports, and I did suffer burnout. You know, I did by senior year, I was pretty whooped, you know, with even though there wasn't travel ball, we did travel a lot, because the coach that was there was really you know, serious about winning state every year and trying to compete. So we would go across the states to Alabama and Florida and Georgia and play in tournaments. So we never had a spring break. We never had a, you know, well, we had Christmas break, but you know, it was just one of those things like today, like kids are experiencing today. I felt like, you know, that was kind of the beginning of it, in the late 80s, early 90s,
Yeah.
date myself now. So that was travel ball to us, but it was part of your high school. You were playing for your team and with your friends that you went to school with. So but yeah, I don't regret any of that. I think it was a good decision. I think it all worked out, you know, well. Like I said, I was one of those athletes growing up that I was definitely not the superstar stud in 3 sports or even 1 sport for that matter, but I could hold my own in enough of them that, you know, it was always like, you know, well, which one do you like? So in baseball was, I just started, I think baseball cards had a lot to do with it too, you know, growing up and getting into that whole scene as we were kids, and I collected and traded and knew all the stats. And you know, my mom would always yell at me for knowing all the stats of these guys but couldn't do my math homework, you know, that typical stuff, you know.
Yeah, well, you were doing your math homework, average, and you
I
had, you know,
was.
on
I
base
was a
percentage.
statistics major at 8 years old.
Right. Exactly, dude. Exactly. I mean, it kind of sounds like baseball was an escape for you. I mean, it sounds like, you know, perhaps that was your way to get away from all the other noise that was going on. You
Yeah.
know, and I certainly feel like that's what I think a lot of people are drawn to sports for, right? I mean, I know for me, is as well. I mean, my dad was going through a lot of stuff on that he was dealing with in terms of like depression, and it was tough at times around the house, and so, you know, baseball was like the way to get away from all that. And I think yours was a different situation, obviously, because it sounds like traveled around a little bit, but baseball was always your foot in the door to meeting people. And it makes sense now because you are a very affable person. You know, you have a ton of friends. You know, people love to be around you, and you love to be around people. And so, you know, I see now where that background came from, and that totally makes sense now.
Yeah, I appreciate that. But you're right. I did use it. And you know, like I said, early on in elementary school, when there were also, you know, whatever was being played on the playground, that's where I was going to be. You know, whether it was the dodgeball, tetherball, kickball, you know, there's only so many things we could do back then. They wouldn't let you bring your glove to school and that kind of
Right.
stuff. So,
Right.
but no matter where I was, I could fit in with those and boys mostly, obviously, because you know, girls did their thing over on this side of the playground and boys did theirs, and I would be accepted. And so yeah, I think it was my way of doing it. And then of course in the classroom, it was being the class clown, you know, getting attention and making jokes, and because it's that whole fear of fitting in.
Yeah.
So what's
It's very
I
disarming
know there's
to
a
have that.
term for it psychologically, or that people do that because of their insecurities and
Mhm.
feeling low self-esteem or wanting to be accepted. So it's like, hey, look at me.
Right.
You look at a lot of stand-up comedians and actors, obviously come from that type of
Yeah, yeah.
I guess. I don't
Yeah, I
know.
mean, that's
I
it. I
don't think of
mean,
it as that, but I guess it's categorized as that a lot.
yeah.
Um, so
But
yeah,
yeah,
it did make it easy.
humor's disarming, right? And so,
Yeah.
it's both disarming and it's attractive, for people. So I mean,
Yeah.
it's a way to kind of uh inoculate yourself into the crowd. So
Yeah.
talk to me about, like, okay, after high school, where was your head? You loved baseball.
So yeah, so I was never really, as you can imagine, a good student as far as like liking school. I made all the grades, I passed all the tests. I was one of those guys that was able to absorb it, and wasn't a great homework guy, or go up to the board and solve this problem guy. But when it came down to it, if it was like, you got to pass this or you're going to fail, then I would pass it. So I was
Right.
kind of an average student. There were times where I was thought like I should apply myself a little bit more. And of course, counselors and parents and people would tell you, you're not even trying and you're getting B's and C's. Imagine if you tried. And so, but that just never registered with me. It wasn't a place where I wanted to excel. I didn't care. And I just was doing enough to get by. So by the time I got to high school and started really getting a social life, and starting to, as we do as teenagers, think we got the world figured out. And
Mhm.
not only am I not going to use the, Pythagorean theorem or anything that algebra teaches me, I'm not going to use history. I'm not going to use English. I'm not going to use any of this stuff. So that was my attitude, was like, just get out of here and move on with life and you'll figure it out. And so that was probably a mistake with
Right,
going
right.
out with that attitude. But I did. I had baseball. And of course, since the time I was 8 years old, I was going to be a Major League Baseball player. That was my dream, and that was going to happen. I settled on it. And it's too bad that you actually have to have some really good ability. And because that was the part where didn't really think about. And so high school came around, and I watched guys old grade or two ahead of me go on, get college scholarships, a couple guys that got drafted late, things like that. And I thought, wow, I'm in a good spot. I just got to keep playing hard and put in the work, and that's going to happen to me. But again, I was a little overconfident in my abilities, and probably a little, looking back on it now, probably thought I was better than I was. But this is how you go through that stuff. And
Yeah, yeah.
I remember my junior year going into my senior year, our team had our best season my sophomore year. We finished third in the state, and we had I think 4 seniors that signed with Division I schools.
Wow.
And so I just felt like I'm in the right spot. All I got to do is ride this out. But then the next year, just our talent dropped off because we were so young. And so going, everyone would say, junior year is the year it has to happen. If you have a good junior year, scouts and college coaches will find you. Of course, as well as we didn't have the videos and all the stuff these guys had today to where you promote yourself. You didn't even think about it. You just showed up and did what you did. And I remember thinking, like, where do these guys come from? Do they just like fly in from somewhere and sit in the stands and take notes? Like, I don't remember seeing any scouts at any of these games or college coaches, but obviously they were there. And so going into my summer of my senior year, I was approached by a coach from a Division III school. And it was a guy that was a friend of one of our coaches. And he said, hey, have you thought about where you're going to go to school next year? And I was like, no, I haven't thought about going to school at all. Like, once I graduate, if I don't sign a pro contract, like I'm not going anywhere. And he was the first guy that was like, yeah, well, I don't think you're going to sign a pro contract, and I don't want to, hurt your feelings here, Nick, but you're 5'7", 140 pounds.
Right.
You got some speed, you got a little defense, but it's a stretch. He was letting me down easy, was what he was doing.
Right.
And so, it was his way of telling me that I should probably think about school. The other thing was, then we started talking about grades. And at the time, my grades were okay. And he just said, you know, if you buckle down this senior year, you bring that B up to an A, that C up to a B, we can get you in. And again, it was like, you're not on the same page as me, man. Like you're asking me to work harder in school when I'm trying to work harder in baseball. So at the end of it, it was, you know, senior year, I realized, saw the writing on the wall. I was like, yeah, it doesn't look like I'm going to get drafted. So there's got to be something else out there for me besides college, because I just was doing everything I could do to not have to go sit in another classroom for not only 4 more years, but 1 more minute. Like I just like I can't do this. I'll
You
go
weren't
crazy.
cut out for school, man.
I wasn't. And you know, at the time, all I thought my options were in Mississippi. It's like I didn't think of 49 other states that I could have gone to school in, and if had I wanted to. But so I remember it was probably midway through senior year, and pulled up to a gas station. It was about 8 o'clock on a Friday night, and I saw this guy sitting on the end of his trunk, and he was kind of sitting there talking to some guys, and he had his uniform on. He had his Marine Corps uniform on. So I went over, and I knew some of the guys he was talking to, and he was a reservist who was off for the weekend, and was there and was telling everybody about boot camp and how he went to this and that. And I was just like, so you mean I got another option besides, you know, getting a job or going to college? And again, didn't go to career day, so don't remember anything from that. You know, didn't attend that.
Right.
But this guy, in the matter of about 30 minutes, changed my life and said, you know, I mean, I went home thinking like, I found something I can do. I found something that is maybe a little bit bigger challenge than even trying to play college baseball or pro baseball. And not a lot of guys are doing it. And from what I gather, this guy's saying that, you know, it's the hardest one, it's the toughest one. So I went down to the recruitment center a couple of days later, and they're all in a row: Navy, Army, Air Force, Marines, all in one. You know, back then they had them in the mall or wherever they were.
Yeah, I remember.
And I remember standing outside looking at all of them. It's kind of like, you know, Burger King, McDonald's, Chick-fil-A. You know, it's like, which one do I want to go into? And this huge dude comes out of the Marine Corps thing, and he's like, "What are you trying to figure out?" And I was like, I don't know, man. I'm just trying to, you know, I was just kind of looking in here. I was maybe going to talk to somebody about joining the military. He's like, "Well, there's only one branch." He's like, you may think you see 4 choices here but there's only one choice. He's like, "You want to be the best?" I'm like, "Well, yeah." Well, am I going to say no? And he goes, "Get in here." And that was it. Like, I didn't even check out the other branches. I went in there, I talked to this guy and told him what I wanted to do. And he lied his ass off to me and told me that I could play baseball in the Marine Corps and all these other things. But, you know, he also pumped me up and got me thinking about how cool it would be to go through a hell, you know, 16 weeks of hell to earn a title that no one can ever take away from you, and blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Now, I got to remind you too, that this is in peacetime.
Right. Okay.
Desert Storm had not happened yet.
Yeah. Okay.
So as a country, we were in peacetime and had not been in any conflict since like 84. And, you know, what was the bombing in Beirut, you know, things like that. So it was like, we had little skirmishes, but we weren't in full blown war.
Is this late 80s?
Yeah. So 88. So that was a great selling point for those guys.
Yeah.
I mean, hey, you're not going to have to go fight. You don't have to do anything. You're just going to get this training. We're going to give you a bunch of money so that when you do decide to go to college, you got a GI Bill that will pay for your college, blah, 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 and the whole thing. And now if you, you want to make sure that you don't get thrown on the front lines in the infantry, you got to take this test, which you had to take anyways, the aptitude test for the service, you know, ASVAB test. And, you know, if you score higher than this, then you can get a job in administration or, you know, working on jets or tanks or, you know, all these other things that don't involve killing or being shot at. Right. So, like I said, they're really good salesmen. So, so I went for it. You know, I went home, I told my dad. My dad thought I was crazy. He was just like, "Sorry, can we say that?"
Yeah, it's all right. Yeah.
And are we on delay?
Yeah, I'll bleep it out.
And you know, my dad grew up during Vietnam era and was highly against me going into
Okay.
the military.
Yeah.
And you know, it was one of those things where he pleaded with me, you know, look, you can go to any college in the country. I'll take out a second mortgage. We'll figure out how to pay it, you know, if you just don't do this. But I did it. And you know, at the time, the reasons were probably a bit immature. But
Uh-huh.
as I went through it and as I look back, you know, again, one of the best decisions I ever made. Don't regret it one bit. And as I try to kind of peel back the layers of what I was going through at that time in my life, I'm kind of proud of myself for looking at it and saying, you know, this isn't a cop out or a way for me to do something easier. It was actually a bigger challenge than I anticipated.
Heck yeah, man.
So, so that was kind of, you know, again, looking back in hindsight, it's something that I'm more proud of than I was at the time. And but yeah, so I did it, went in for did my 4 years. Of course, Desert Storm breaks out in year 2, and we've been at war ever since. And was fortunate enough to get out of there with my wits still about me, and of course all my limbs, and you know, not have to relive a bunch of really horrible traumatic experiences like a lot of my friends that I went through with who continued to stay in and you know, go through and retire and whatnot. But
Yeah.
yeah, that was a good decision on my part, I think. So
Yeah, that's cool, man. That's cool. But so what happened after? So you reconnected with baseball? I mean, you
yeah, about 2 years in, I started getting really antsy about getting out. Like 2 years was plenty enough to slap me around and get me
right.
into a mindset. You know, I learned a lot of stuff obviously through the military with, you know, self-discipline and time management and integrity and honor and all those things that they preach that you don't ever lose the rest of your life. Like my wife still hates when you know, she goes and cleans the bathroom and she knows I'm going to go in there and clean it, you know, 10 times better, because I'm not going to leave until it's, you know, you can eat off the floor. So
Right.
just, you know, little habits like that. And so, you know, it geared me to make decisions later in life that I always fall back on. But as I was trying to figure out how can I get out of here before my 4 years are up, I started falling back in love with baseball again. I had a gunnery sergeant who owned a baseball card shop out in Jacksonville in town, and he was kind of like my mentor, my big brother at the time. And he would always, you know, talk to me about, you know, don't do stupid stuff and don't get kicked out and don't try to, you know, go AWOL because it'll fuck you up forever. So basically hang tight. And he took me under his wing and gave me an outlet, you know, outside of the Marine Corps, which was, you know, a little more taste of the civilian life. On weekends, I would get to go with him at card shows, or I'd work at his shop. And I was like, man, this would be a cool business, you know, like
Hmm.
owning a collectibles store and whatnot. And so funny story is I go back to my work one of those days, and I was like, you know, I'm so tired of playing softball on the co-ed, you know, softball league on base, and you know, basketball stuff. I was like, we really need hardball here. So um, I took an ad out in the base paper. We're at Camp Lejeune now, so huge. It's the, you know, First Marine Division, so it's a third of the Marine Corps stationed here, and Navy personnel and so on and so forth. So I take an ad out in the base paper that says, tired of softball, question mark, baseball players wanted. Call this number for more information on new Camp Lejeune Baseball League. I was the only one in it when I wrote this.
Nice.
And so I put the ad out. The ad comes out on whatever day of the week it comes out. And I go to my gunnery sergeant at the time, and I said, hey, I'm going to go take a lunch break. I'll be back in, you know, 45 minutes. Okay, no problem. I come back 45 minutes later, and he's got a stack of Post-it notes. He slams them down on my desk, and he goes, I'm not your secretary. You're mine. I was like, what do you mean, Gunny? What are you talking about? And he's like, you just had 27 phone calls while you were gone about this stupid ass baseball league you've created.
Wow, dude.
So I couldn't believe it, right? So
Yeah.
obviously there was an interest there. And I think within 72 hours, I had like 95 people that I had
Wow.
contacted. Again, no email. We didn't have
Right, right.
the internet may have been invented, but we
Not
weren't using
really.
it. So it
Yeah.
was all just phone calls, phone calls, phone calls, and they were blowing up.
For the love
And
of the game, man. For the love of the game.
yeah, so next thing you know, I'm the commissioner of an on-base league of 8 teams, and I'm getting
Wow.
umpires, and I'm calling the morale and welfare center to get equipment donated. I'm calling the base operations to get lights turned on at night, and I've got a full-fledged league. Like I said, 8 teams, and now I've got a schedule together and who plays who on what days. It was awesome. I was
That's
alive
cool.
again. I was like,
Right,
man, I
right.
can get through the next year and a half if I have this. And that's what got me through, man. Like I said, it's kind of
Yeah.
what changed me. And from then, everything I've done since then, I look back at that and be like, you started a baseball league on a military base where there was nobody doing it. So if you can do that, you can pretty much, do anything you want, really is the mindset that I took. And it was tough at first. You asked like, how did I get back into it? So I get out of the Marine Corps. I go back to college. I use my GI Bill for 3.5 semesters or something. Didn't take me long to figure out how much I hated school. So now I'm more mature. I'm older. I've been around the world. I've seen some things. Last place I wanted to be was sitting in a classroom with a 25-year-old professor telling me, how to,
Hmm.
write a cover letter or something. So I again, just I gave it a good shot. I gave it the old college try, if you will.
Right,
And I
right.
was like, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. And that's when I would say is the first time I dove into the entrepreneur world and tried to start my own businesses. Had a bunch of odd jobs from that time, from like the end of my 20s till I turned 30. But I didn't get back into baseball till I moved to California and met some guys in the league that you and I met in,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
you played with us, and you remember
Frank.
Glenn and Frank, and
Yeah, Frank.
so
Yeah.
yeah, so I met a guy that had a baseball academy, and I was like, "What's a baseball academy? What are you talking
Right,
about?"
right. That
And
because
he,
that was nouveau back then, right? I
oh,
mean,
totally,
yeah,
yeah, and there
nobody
was,
ever went to a baseball academy growing up. I mean, that now you can all of a sudden you can go to a place where they've got cages and machines and
yeah,
individual lessons and stuff. That was really cool. So yeah, go
yeah.
ahead.
So Frank, the guy that we knew, Frank Leva, who was the coach of our team, said, "Hey, I go to this guy on weekends. I pay him $25. He throws live batting practice to me, curveballs, changeups, fastballs, no machine. I take my time. I do whatever I want. If I want to take some fly balls, he'll hit them to me." I was like, "What? That's
Nice.
how's
Right.
that even? How do you do that?" So he took me there, and I met the guy that ran it. His name's Glenn Rosh. I want to make sure if he ever sees this that he gets his credit, because if it weren't for him, I wouldn't be here talking to you today about this, because
I remember
he's the
Glenn, man.
one.
He was a great guy.
Yeah, and he showed me. He's like, yeah, I do lessons with kids after school from 4 to 7 or 8 at night. Blah blah blah. We do camps, we do clinics, we do pitching clinics, hitting clinics. I was like, I was blown away. I was like, this is incredible. How do I do it? Where do I sign up? And so I started working for him for a little while. And next thing you know, he says, I got another facility. I can't handle both. I can't be in 2 places at once. My partner over here wants out. I want to focus over here. So this is available. You can start doing stuff over there.
And he was
And
in Burbank, right? In the other place was Studio City,
Burbank and Sherman Oaks.
Sherman Oaks. Yeah, excuse me. Yeah.
Yeah. So Sherman Oaks was where I got my start, and we came up with a number, and he said, you can buy into this franchise. It was a franchise at the time. It was
Hmm.
called West Coast Baseball School, and there were probably 10 or 11 of them throughout Southern California. And I had to go meet the founder, Nez Baleo, who's now an agent with CAA, and I met him and had to get the okay to come in and do this. And of course, Glenn vouched for me, and
You had to meet the Godfather, huh?
I had to meet the Godfather. I had to kiss the ring.
That's
So
right. That's great.
I got back and I opened up my half of the cage, and my other partner Carmen Bucci had the other half, and he had one leg out the door. And so I ended up buying both of them out, and now I had a cage that was making money with me in it, doing lessons and camps, and I had an empty cage that was making no money. And so I went and got a good friend to be a partner, and we did that for about I don't know 10 years. And did camps and clinics and high school programs, junior high programs, and that was it. That was next thing you know, I was making my living full time and doing pretty well, just teaching the game of baseball in the private sector and not having to deal with politics of administrations or
Yeah.
parents complaining that my kid's not playing
Right.
and leading off and playing short. And it was I
And
didn't think I could do it.
you had some pretty good guys come through, right? I mean, Jack Flaherty was at the Studio City.
Yeah, I mean,
Sherman Oaks.
Sherman Oaks, yeah, Sherman Oaks. We've had a handful of guys that came through there, and that are now either former big leaguers or current big leaguers, and a lot of celebrities. Kids came through there, as you can imagine, just being in that part of the world, and so we just kept running that business until the travel ball started coming, and I was like, I don't know if I can get into this. And by that time I was burned out, just like anything. I was looking for a new change, and so from there I segued into scouting, and that's how I got into scouting, and then coaching. I got a high school job coaching, did some part-time volunteer work with some colleges with some other friends of mine that coaches, and then yeah, you want me to keep going, or
yeah? Well, I mean, you went from Studio City to, I'm just trying to kind of keep the pathway along. You started getting into scouting. Scouting led you kind of a couple different places, and then Costa Rica, right? I mean, you kind of went down.
So the whole thing about the scouting world was I was approached by one of my mentors at the time, Rick Mignante, who's an area code scout for the Oakland A's. He asked me if I'd be interested in running a local Southern California scout ball team that takes the best, high school players in the area. There were several teams, so it wasn't the best, but it was some of the better guys to compete in this fall scout league where scouts would go and watch these games of the so-called best players their junior, senior year. I said, hell yeah, I want to do that. And so he got it okayed with the organization. We had our first season, I think, in 2008. And then from there, I started to help out with the pre-draft workout in May and June for the organization, for the A's. So I would organize the location, get the players there, get them warmed up, throw the BP, hit the phone goes, while all the brass for the organization would write their notes and talk about their players. And so that was a good way for me to get my foot in the door and show them that I had some, abilities to do this as a job. A couple of years went by. I think like year 2 or 3, I had found out about Scout School. It was put on by Major League Baseball. Every year they would have a Scout School in Phoenix, Arizona. The only way to attend that school was that you had to be sponsored by an organization. So all 30 teams would sponsor 2 people. And so 60 individuals were allowed into the class. The teams paid for it. And it was, I think, a 2-week course where Major League Baseball's scouting bureau would bring their scouts in and teach us the ins and outs of the scouting world, on the amateur side, the difference between amateur and pro and advanced scouting, the whole insight to that department of the organization. Well, each year I would ask to go to Phoenix, and I would get bumped for 2 other guys that were either already in the organization that they needed to send to give them more education, so they're already paying them, or it was a
relative
that just
it was a relative of somebody.
Yeah, or it was a relative of one of this guy, or another brother of another guy that played in their organization. So I just kept getting knocked down, and so I found out that every 2 years they do the same school in the Dominican Republic. And the next year that it was there was 2010. And I went to Rick and I said, hey, can you find out if the A's are sending anybody down to the Dominican Republic? Well, they weren't, because number one, it was the A's, so they weren't going to pay
Right.
double the amount of money that it costs to send somebody to a foreign country to do this with airfare and
Yeah.
hotel and all that.
Yeah.
So I found it, my trump card, I guess, or my ace in the hole was, I'll pay for it. All you got to do is sponsor me, because I have to be sponsored by a team. So if you sign off on that saying I'm the guy that's going to represent the A's, you don't have to pay anything and I'll take care of it. So he ran that up the ladder and it came back fine. This kid's been bugging us for 5 years. Let him go. So that's how I got into scout school.
Nice.
Frank Marcos at the time was the director of the MLB Scouting Bureau. I was only one of 5, 6 American English speakers in a class of like 65.
Oh, wow.
So all the 60 other participants were international scouts, guys that were going to become scouts in Venezuela, Mexico, Colombia, Dominican. Of course, there was a lot of Dominicans there because it was on their home turf. And we had one female. She was from New York. She was in our class as well. So that was, right at the start of a lot of doors opening up for women in baseball and in scouting and operations. So she was awesome, and she hung around us obviously because we were American, and it was a little bit easier for her to talk with us, even though she spoke Spanish. But anyway, that's a whole nother story. So we get through 2 weeks of that. I graduate, and I'm like, okay, where's the job coming from?
Right.
I'm official. I got my certificate. Who do I go to work for? I guess they just picked my team, right? Wrong. So went through interviews after interviews after interviews with, I don't know, 6 or 7 different teams. And, first interview, second interview, third interview, sorry, we're going with somebody else. First interview, second interview, sorry, we're going with somebody else. So that was really frustrating.
Yeah, I bet.
Again, it didn't help that I was in the hotbed, of baseball in Southern California, where if you're a scout here, you don't just quit and decide to go to the Midwest or some other place. You either die or retire, and that's how positions open up.
Yeah.
When, California, Texas, Florida, where you've got the world at your fingertips. So I started interviewing for jobs in other parts of the country because that's all I could get, the Four Corners, the South, the Northeast, the Midwest. And, my wife was pregnant at the time. I'm going on 40. I was like not a spring chicken or single or able to just, go
pick up and leave
somewhere. So I, had this crazy idea that I wanted to figure out how to maybe stay in Latin America. And so the one of the instructors was actually the translator for the school. He would translate everything that the American, English speaking instructors were saying to the 90% Spanish speaking only students. He would translate to them.
Back and forth, yeah.
Yeah, and he was a guy from California, so he lived close to where I live, but his family's from Nicaragua. He was born in Nicaragua. He went to high school in California, but still had ties and family and connections in Nicaragua. He also had a baseball academy in Nicaragua, and his whole thing where him and his brothers were trying to get MLB teams to look into Nicaragua for players, because at the time there weren't a lot of guys getting signed out of there. I mean, you could count on one hand how many guys had actually made it to the big leagues from Nicaragua. And they were only signing, I think at the time our numbers were, less than a dozen players a year that were even getting signed out of that country.
Interesting.
So, which has grown tremendously since then. But so we sat down and he said, I got an idea. If you can get a team to hire you to come to Nicaragua, we can help you see the whole country, see a bunch of players that you can take back to the organization. And obviously you're going to look like a hero because nobody else is down here doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought about it for a while. We put a plan together, and I wrote out an email to all 30 teams, sent them off email, got a few responses back of thank you, we'll put you on the bottom of the pile or whatever.
Right.
Most of them didn't even respond.
Uh-huh.
I got two responses from interested teams. One was the Angels and one was the Texas Rangers. So I went to spring training that year. This was 2011, I think, 11 or 12. And I went to spring training. I met with both international directors. Both of them were extremely interested and excited to maybe possibly find an area that has been untapped, and wanted to see if they could find a player or two in a country that wasn't saturated with all the other MLB teams, like the Dominican. You know, everybody's got an academy in the Dominican.
Yeah.
They all have connections in Venezuela and Colombia. So those are your top three, Latin countries. And Mexico's a whole nother story because they force you to play in their league and all this other stuff, but it's another conversation. So the Nicaragua was intriguing to these two scouting directors, and Mike Daly is the one that gave me the opportunity to do this for the Texas Rangers. So we sat in the stadium one day in surprise. We talked a little bit about my background, his background, what they're trying to do. He said, put together an itinerary, give me a budget. Let me see it. Where are you going to go? How many days are you going to spend there? Who are the academies, blah, blah, blah. So I went back to my connection there, and we talked about it. We mapped it all out, got an itinerary, got a budget. I shot it over to him. He said, I'll run it up the flagpole. I'll be in touch with you in however many days it takes. About 2 days later, I get an email saying, you're going to get a phone call from our secretary. She needs to get your address to send you a package and get your dates for your flights. And we're sending you a check to cover your trip. Good luck. Go find me a shortstop.
That's great.
And I was like, holy shit.
It actually worked.
It worked. And, it was a kind of a consulting. I wasn't being hired full time or anything like that. It was basically like a freelance consulting, go see what you can do for us and we'll see where it goes. So a couple of days later, I get this huge box on my front porch. It's got, 6 dozen Major League pearls, baseballs, in their case, a pair of shorts, Rangers t-shirt, Rangers hat, a stalker gun.
Wow.
And this is where the note from Mike said, go find us a shortstop or something like that.
Right.
And I was like, well, shit, I guess I'm on my way. And so I went down, spent about 2 weeks in Nicaragua, found a few guys that I really liked, and sent it up the chain of command, and didn't hear from them for a few months. And then about 6 months later, they asked me to go back again, follow up on a couple of these guys. And this time they were sending another member of the Rangers who was going to chaperone with me and kind of go around and for me to see. His job was to find out if the Rangers needed a full-time job or full-time guy in Nicaragua. And if they did, was I the guy? And so that was his job, was to find that out. So we went down, we showed him everything. We found the guy that I wanted to sign, and he liked him as well. And learned all kinds of stuff about, contract negotiations and what to offer and bonuses and all this kind of stuff. Again, a whole other podcast, but it was eye-opening for me. And I fell in love with the Latin culture. Tried to figure out how can I stay down there. And that's when I went to visit a friend in Costa Rica. Coincidentally, the same friend I said that we went to elementary school together, and he asked me how I went to. Yeah, that guy. Wow. So went to visit him. Went to the only stadium in San Jose, Costa Rica. There were some guys playing. Turns out they were the national team was practicing. Didn't take long for the word to get around the stadium that the gringo sitting in the stands was a scout for the Rangers. So the president of the Olympic Committee for the Federation of Costa Rica Baseball came over. He says, "Hey, are you a scout for the Rangers?" I said, "Yes, I am." not, full time, but I'm here representing them
Right.
because was just in Nicaragua and just here seeing what you guys got. And they offered me the pitching coach job for the next 6 weeks while they were training to make tryouts. And I said, well, I'm only here for a couple of weeks. Long story longer, we started talking, and it turned out that I ended up putting my name in the hat for the head coach instead of the pitching coach, because they didn't have anybody. They didn't have a head coach, a pitching coach, or anything. And I said,
Wow.
if you can give me the head coach job and pay me this much money that I can survive on, I'll sign a 1-year contract with you. And they did. They met my demands, I guess, or my requests, and
Yeah.
came back, and I had a contract. And so I became the head coach of the national team. And my job was to get these guys ready for the 2013 Central America games. And
Nice.
and continue to look at players to give to the Rangers. And that got me to Nicaragua, Guatemala, Panama, El Salvador, Honduras, all over, to the Dominican a couple of times. And so that's how I got into the international scope of things. Once that job ended, we stayed in Costa Rica, my wife, and now I have a daughter. At the time, she was about 9 months old and growing. And I ended up getting picked up by the MLB scouting bureau, the guys that trained me 2 years earlier, and became the Latin America guy to cover those countries I mentioned for the bureau before they went defunct.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's great, man. I mean, I didn't realize the depth of it. I guess I didn't realize you'd gone to. I just remember, because we've been friends forever, so I just remember the Dominican and I remember Costa Rica, but I didn't know all the blanks in between, man. So that's what a
Oh
cool.
man, I gave you the short version too, man. I mean,
Yeah,
there's
we'll
so
circle
much.
back with another
Yeah,
podcast.
there's just
We'll
so
get
much
deeper
stuff
into
in there. I
this.
want to keep you going. I don't want
Yeah,
to, bog down your time, but
but I mean
yeah.
I mean what a unique and fulfilling way to a stay with baseball, and then b experience life and like a completely different culture,
Oh
uh,
yeah.
and then be fortunate enough to coast everybody. If you haven't looked up Costa Rica, take a look at it on Google, man, because it's a beautiful country. uh,
Yeah.
and to be able to kind of raise your daughter there for a while as well is just
Yeah,
such
we spent 5 years there.
an
So it was
experience, right?
definitely worth it.
And
Yeah.
so then after Costa Rica, you went to then another country, right? You went
Yeah.
to the great Canada there.
Yeah. Went to the neighbors to the north. We were considering a move back to the United States, but didn't really want to go back to the United States right away. Um, a lot of other things were going on. We had a destination wedding business that we started from scratch, and my wife pretty much ran with it and was thinking about maybe doing something in a different location. Our daughter didn't love the ocean, which is a terrible place to be if you don't love the ocean,
Right, true enough. Yeah.
so we had to think about her needs and where she could thrive. So I put myself out there um, to find another job. And it was interesting because another guy that I had met through LinkedIn was starting a company called Baseball Jobs Overseas. And he's still going strong. His name's David Burns, which shout out to David. If it wasn't for him, I wouldn't have found my next job, which was in Corner Brook, Newfoundland.
Oh, that's right. You went East Coast first. Yeah.
So I went to this rock to get
Right.
over to this rock. And David found me, well, connected the local Corner Brook Baseball Association was looking for a technical director, they call them up there, which is like our player development, coach
Yeah.
development.
Yeah.
And I connected with them and I went up there for a 12-week job in the summer of that year. And we went back to Costa Rica, re-upped for another summer. And while I was there for that summer, they helped me find a job in British Columbia, which we ended up moving to Vancouver Island. BIU, shout out there, and did the same job for 5 years in Nanaimo, British Columbia on Vancouver Island. And then now we're back here in California where it all started, August
Wow.
of last year.
Wow. So what, again, I mean, if you're a high school kid or you're a middle school kid and you're like, okay, maybe I've seen the writing on the wall, how do I stay connected? I mean, to be able to take, and you have to be an entrepreneur, you have to have that, and you've got a great skill at that, right, man? You've always been good at just taking, nothing and turning it into something. And you can find those experiences out there that are so unique. I mean, I really admire the way that you just, you love to stay connected to the game, and then you find unique ways to stay connected to the game. And
Yeah,
going from the baseball academy to the scouting team to the Dominican Republic to the Costa Rica and all the Central American countries, then to Canada on the East Coast and Canada on the West Coast, and then full circle back to California. Uh,
yeah,
you know, the life experience in itself supersedes anything else. I mean,
absolutely,
and
absolutely.
and I think when a lot of times when you're going through high school, or there's a really, they kind of put you in a trough, right? And they give you, hey, you're going to be in marketing, you're going to be a lawyer, you're going to be construction, you're going to be, there's only 4 or 5 different avenues to go down. So to be able to kind of step outside that mold, like you did, you went through the Marines. I can see your picture in the background back there.
Look
Uh,
at that guy. That's
yeah,
you know what USMC stands for?
no,
Uncle Sam's Misguided Children. There's one of them
never
right
heard that
there.
before. I never heard that. That's great.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, but kudos, man. And so, I mean,
Uh,
just a cool and unique experience and journey,
yeah.
that I hope people listen to and take in, because I I didn't love school either. College isn't for everybody, and there's a unique way to find your way through whatever it is that you're given, and then what you want to do as well.
Yeah. No, it's you said it when all that life stuff supersedes all of it. Like I would say most of the joy that I've experienced in my life, say from 18 on, outside of the birth of my daughter and meeting and marrying my wife and all that, everybody's got that at the top. But so
Right.
outside of that, all the other joys that I've experienced are directly from baseball, are because of baseball.
Yeah.
Whether it's the travel, like you said, the opportunities to make a living, a lot of it's by fear too. I mean, my biggest thing was like, I there was a portion of my life there when I got out of the Marine Corps and before I came to California where I did, I don't know how many dozens of jobs that I thought I could find a way, like you're talking about, whether it's marketing or roofing or, working in the film business or sales of all different kinds. Like all those things were jobs that I just, like it
Yeah.
just, I couldn't do it. And I was like, so entrepreneuring, being an entrepreneur was really by trial and error, I guess, by a process of elimination. Really, it was like,
Yeah.
okay, I never thought about it. It wasn't like, oh, I always want to work for myself and be and if I could say to people that are wanting to do that now, maybe look into the jobs because it's really
Yeah. Yeah.
it's really
It's
really harder than you think
it's a
to
tough
do
road,
this.
man, no doubt. No doubt. I mean,
Yeah, but I've managed to land on my feet and figure out ways to make money again through the passion of the game and always trying to look ahead 2 or 3 steps of where I could go with it, that didn't require that bachelor's or master's degree that that I didn't have. So, and fortunately for me, all the things that I've chosen, I was able to pull it off, so to speak.
is there anything now you're working on, or anything like a product or a service or anything like that you want to talk about, or you're dealing with, or?
Yeah, well, so a couple of things I've been working on since we moved to British Columbia, just prior to COVID starting. The Major League Baseball's scouting bureau, as I mentioned, went through school and then worked for them. They were wiped out by Major League Baseball. They shut it down about 2015 or 16, I want to say. So I had the idea of taking that and running with it, saying, okay, well, and for those of you that don't know what the Bureau did, what they did was that they were a third-party scouting bureau that went around to colleges and high schools, and they had a pro side as well, where they would write reports on players and they would sell that information to all 30 major league teams. And at the time, it was mandatory that those 3 teams had to purchase that information. So a lot of the bigger market teams like the Yankees, Dodgers, whatever, they didn't need that extra information because they had a big enough scouting staff that they could just get their own information. But It was supposed to even the playing field with the smaller market teams that didn't or couldn't afford, 5 scouts in California or, 10 guys on the East Coast or in the Midwest. For whatever reason, without getting into the political side of it, they got rid of it. Manfred got rid of it. And so I thought there might still be a need for that type of service. Mm-hmm. So I started a company called Global Sports Metrics, went to the winter meetings, met with some people, went back to the Rangers because they were the one that gave me my start. I had some connections there, and they ended up ultimately being my first and only paying client to get that information in those countries. And so I had 15 guys spread out that were collecting data and video in those countries, and I sold it to the Rangers. And then just before COVID was about to happen in March, I was in Arizona and met with 4 or 5 other teams. The ball was starting to roll, so had to pivot once COVID hit, shut down everything. And so now I'm back in the development side of things, working with a friend and partner in the athlete development area or arena, right? So mm-hmm. we test and train athletes, starting with baseball and softball first, because that's where our backgrounds are. And we help athletes and coaches find out where kids are starting out. This is where you're at physically and mentally. This is where you want to be. So how do we get you there? Mm-hmm. And it's a tough industry because there's a lot of experts out there and people out there that feel that their methodologies are the best. And, you should be focusing on mechanics, or you should be focusing on skill set, or you should be focusing on strength training or nutrition or mental. It's like, it's all of it. You should be focusing on
right.
all of it.
Right.
No one component
is high, right? Yeah.
No one component is more important than the other. They're all important. So to answer your question, that's where I'm at with some products, digital. Still love to do the one-on-one stuff with committed athletes. Because I've gotten older and because I'm kind of weeded through a lot of that stuff, I'm very picky for who I want to work with. Like it's not just anyone with a desire and a parent with a checkbook. Like those days are gone. So I get to be a little bit more selective on which players that I work with. But that's where I'm at right now, and cool. Still looking at using this game to make my living and put food on the table and keep the dream. I started a podcast a while back called Love the Game, Live the Dream, which you were a guest on. I forget which episode number you were on there, but thinking of reviving that as well. Goes along with what you're doing, finding guests and finding people that want to tell their story about how they ended up staying in baseball without being a number 1 draft choice or a superstar major leaguer. But there's so many jobs in this game, in this industry, that I don't think a lot of people realize that you don't have to be a former pro player or whatever or a super stud to do these jobs. Anywhere from the guy that takes the tickets at the ballpark to working within an organization, working within minor league baseball. I mean, there's independent ball, there's leagues all around the world, Japan, Mexico, Korea, there's
the Netherlands.
The Netherlands, there's a huge market for jobs that I think a lot of young people don't realize.
Right.
So that's why I started that podcast called Love the Game, Live the Dream. and use my story as the example of, if I can do it, anyone can do it. So, it makes it a little bit easier.
That's cool, man. That's cool.
Yeah.
Well, we'll circle back and get into a deeper podcast one day with the Central American and that storyline and whatever products or services you want to pub, man. We'll keep on doing that because I really enjoy understanding where you're always evolving into something else. So I love that, and I think that speaks to your drive, but it also will speak to people who want to stay in the game and they don't know what they're doing right now, and that's okay too, right? I mean, I think life is a 3-act play, right? So
Yeah.
your age 0 through 20, you kind of 25, you kind of learn what you're supposed to learn, and then 25 to 50, you got to go figure it out, and then 50 to 75, you kind of hopefully got it figured out, and you kind of go from there. So a lot of people before they're getting out of school trying to figure out what they want to do, and I think this is some nice insight for them to try to latch on to.
Yeah, for sure. I couldn't agree more with you. And I think if there's anything I can, give advice wise, is touch on what you said there, is go do as much stuff as you can. Along the lines of how we started this conversation, finding your passion for baseball by playing other sports and becoming versatile at other ways of strategy and understanding coaches and reacting with coaches is that same thing with life. Once you're not playing sports anymore, other than for exercise, do the same thing with careers, with jobs. Find out what it is that you're really excited to get up and go do, and try as many different. I mean, I think I wrote them down on a plane one time of all the jobs that I've done, and it was like 2 pages. Some I was at for 2 days, and some I was at for for a year. But when I sat back and looked at it, I was like, there wasn't many that I missed.
Right.
So it's
But
like, whether
you're
it's
right, man.
manual labor or try them all. Try them all and find out. You never know. You
That's
might find
great
out that
philosophy, man.
you might find out that there's something out there that you didn't know existed that you're really, really keen on, and want to spend more time doing it. So, what's Simon Sinek, I think, his quote is, if you go to a job that you hate every day, that's called stress. If you go to a job that you love every day, that's called passion. So
Yeah, I like that. That's right. I've seen that a couple of times, and I love that. Yeah,
that's
I
good.
mean, this goes along with the saying, if you do what you love every day, it's not work.
Yep.
So so there you go. I mean, go out
It
there,
is.
try, put on a different hat every day if you need to, figure out what it is that, that fits the best. And once you do, go with it.
Yeah. Good
Cool.
stuff.
Well,
Well,
man,
thanks for having me on, man. I really
yeah,
appreciate it.
yeah, I appreciate you jumping on here, man.